Hey everyone, Alessandra here. I just wanted to show you what I look like while I'm a tiger.
Where'd you get your face like that?
I've always been like this for my whole life.
Nah, people have seen you before and you don't look like that.
Yeah. My dad. People don't believe you. I was born in the jungle like that.
What do you do when the blueprint for your life doesn't make space for one of the most cherished people in it? For us, that moment came when our daughter came out to us at a young age in the capital city of the reddest state in the country. We looked for voices of experience, people who had walked this road before us. But within our circles, we couldn't find anyone who had faced what we were facing. And when I searched for podcasts for Christian parents of LGBTQ plus kids, there was nothing. Walking this road alone turned us inside out. My wife even redirected her medical career because of it. What started as a search to love my daughter better became a renovation of me. And nearly a decade later, I'm filling the void of what I needed years ago and using our story and experience to help others walking the same road. We're having the conversations that aren't happening in church or in the echo chambers of politics. If you have an LGBTQ plus someone in your life, this podcast is for you.
You are surrounded by love you can't see. And the only reason you can't see it is because it's afraid.
You find a way to celebrate your child and accept your child, or you'll find a way to live without them.
Welcome to Love Without Asterisks. My name is Jeff Click. This is a podcast for anyone who has an LGBTQ plus someone in their life and wants to love them more completely. It's a space willing to ask hard questions and dig for deeper answers. And it's a place that doesn't avoid discomfort that often comes when reconciling a worldview shaped by tradition with the call to love our LGBTQ plus someone fully without condition. And while my story begins as a parent, this podcast isn't just for parents. Now, before we go further, let me clear up what this podcast is not. It's not a Christian podcast, and it's not a woke podcast. It's not liberal, it's not conservative, and it's not here to push an agenda. It is, however, faith-informed and culturally relevant. If that resonates, I'd love for you to subscribe. And if you find this podcast worthy, it would mean a lot to me if you'd leave a review. Your words help others who are searching for resources like this to know that they're not alone. And please share this with someone in your life who might need it too. For me, this journey started when our daughter, Alessandra, came out at a young age. We were raising our family in the capital city of the reddest state in America, in circles almost entirely evangelical and conservative. And when she came out, we felt like we had no one with experience to turn to. One of the first things I did was search for podcasts for Christian parents of LGBTQ plus kids. At the time, there were none. What followed were years of deep struggle, wrestling through matters of faith, tradition, and mental health. We didn't get it all right. We had what I call trench moments, the kind you never forget. It was a long, lonely road. For my wife, Desiree, it meant returning to the workforce and shifting her medical specialty from family practice to psychiatry, today serving as a psychiatric PA. That change was deeply shaped by our family's journey and her desire to help others facing the kinds of struggles that we've walked through ourselves. For me, it led back to that void I'd found years earlier when I searched for a podcast and came up empty. That's how Love Without Asterisks was born. It's not something I ever thought I'd be doing. To some extent, I'm still reluctant. But I know what it feels like to walk this road in these circumstances. And I know there are so many more out there like us. The truth is, our story is the podcast. And on a road that often feels lonely, we searched for voices, clear signals in the middle of all the noise and rhetoric. Some of those voices were well known. Others were closer than I realized. At a time when my lifelong circles didn't have much to offer on this topic, it turns out my first guest was exactly the right person at exactly the right time. What started as a casual catch-up over coffee has stretched into one of my most valued friendships. These days, we meet monthly. We talk about a lot of things, but our favorite topic, the one we come back to every time, is our love for our kids. He's become an example to me of what it looks like to love without fine print, without conditions, without fear. He's taught me how to love without asterisks. So it's only fitting that he's the first voice you hear on this podcast. In this conversation, you'll hear us wrestle with the tensions of loving our kids well while carrying the weight of religious and cultural expectations. You'll hear about the signal to noise metaphor, how to tune into what matters most and quiet the static of other people's opinions. We'll also talk about Metamorphosis, an 8-week guided email series I've created to help you move forward towards unconditional love step by step. Lastly, in this episode, you'll hear how transformative encounters and steady presence can reshape the way we love and the communities we build. My guest is Peter Fulmer. He's a real estate professional and former sportscaster whose love of the game extends beyond the field to the stories that define people's lives. Here in Oklahoma City, he's deeply involved in the fight to eradicate homelessness, bringing the same persistence and heart to that mission that he brings to every corner of his life. But Peter's proudest title is dad to not one, but 2 LGBTQ+ children, now adults, whose lives have shaped his understanding of unconditional love. With them, his love is steady, fiercely protective, and rooted in the belief that nothing, no opinion, no obstacle, should ever get in the way of showing up. 2 quick show notes before we dive in. First, this is episode 1, the first of what I consider the foundational episodes that lay the groundwork for everything that follows. And like anything first run, it's not perfect. You'll notice a minor audio hiccup I discovered after recording. But don't worry, I've fixed that for future episodes. Second, a fair warning. I let my guests speak freely, so at times you'll hear adult themes and adult language. So let's begin. This is episode 1 of Love Without Asterisks. Here is my conversation with my friend Peter Fulmer. Well, Peter, this has been a long time coming. We've traded coffee, cups of coffee at a trendy coffee spot for microphones on a podcast set, but I couldn't be happier that you're the guy sitting in that chair today. So thank you for being here.
I'm really excited. You kind of surprised me with the swiftness from which this went from one to the next. And it's cool. This is going to be great. I'm excited about it.
Thank you. Yeah, and what's interesting is that our relationship goes way back. At least our friendship started as neighbors years ago. But you really became someone who, as I mentioned in the introduction, you were broadcasting on a frequency that just really landed with me. Mm-hmm. And it's to me, it's fascinating that came through just simply through following you on Instagram.
You know, I've been, since the kids came out and with some of the homelessness work that I do, I've understood for a long time that I am often the guy in the room that understands these things in a room of people that don't. And so if I think that I have a voice in a room that normally doesn't have one, I feel sort of compelled to speak to that and to try to tell stories and speak the truth that I'm living, so that maybe other people that are like me and that have histories like me and that have lived in the world around me, so that they can understand it and they can see it in a way and from a person that they know and understand. And so I felt some duty to that. And I love my kids. I mean, really, most of what I do is I'm just a guy, and I'm living this world, and I'm living this life over here, and my kids happen to be gay, and we okay, onward and upward. What's next?
Yeah, and that's I think that's the central topic. That it's not the only topic, but
Right.
it's the central topic that I think has paved the way for such a unique friendship that we have. I mean, I love the fact that we can show up for coffee once a month, sit down with no agenda,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like we don't need an agenda. There's plenty to talk about, but it always seems to come back to our kids
Yeah.
at some point.
Well, and that's kind of where it started. I mean, I didn't know. I remember the post that started all of this. I was excited about my new house, and I took a picture, like a video, with Bonnie Raitt playing, by the way. And Jeff said he didn't want to be seduced today, and it turned into coffee, and lo and behold. But I remember going to that first coffee, not really knowing. I mean, I didn't think there was an agenda, but after all, there was one. And you had something that you wanted to ask me about. I didn't know what it was going to be or that it even existed. But from that first one, when you started asking me those questions, I felt that much more engaged, because I do love my children, and it feels like an unreasonable way, and I understand that I've had a different road than a lot of other people, and I've approached it differently than a lot of other people, and I've had problems that some other people don't have had to address or manage, and it's unique for all of us. But I think that our stories are similar, and I think that as we've spoken about before, I'm about 15 minutes ahead of you on this train, and there are very few voices in our universe that can speak to this experience. And I think that when you find one, you want to listen to it.
That's a great way of putting it. So one of the things that I find particularly compelling about our friendship, and I think it fuels our conversation, is the fact that we come from the same community.
Yeah.
We were neighbors back in the day, same neighborhood. We now live in a slightly different area of town, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't really change anything significantly. But the thing that compels, or that strikes me from a contrast standpoint, is the differences in our upbringing, some of the factors that have shaped how we view and experience having a child that's LGBTQ, in your case, having two children who are LGBTQ. Yeah. You mentioned the word approach. You have an approach. And that to me is probably one of the things I was most interested in, because I had no approach. I had no idea how to approach the fact that I had an LGBTQ daughter.
Yeah.
In the community. And when I say community, I don't necessarily mean the location. I just mean the circles that we ran in, the deep evangelical Southern Baptist Christian ties that anchor my history, my worldview,
right?
My views on Scripture, even politics to some extent, or not to some extent, but let's be honest, at least to a great extent. And I found myself not quite knowing exactly what to do next when I learned this news, when I realized that my worldview didn't seem or feel to make space for the reality of what we were going to walk with our daughter through in her future.
Right.
So knowing what you know about where we live,
yeah,
and the fact that we're the capital city of the reddest state in America,
77, baby.
Tell me a little bit about the contrast as you see it.
Well, I mean, my world, the universe in which I live and the ecosystem that we existed in when we got, when our kids were coming up, was a little bit different than yours. Not quite so evangelical, not quite so, religiously based. Now, the kids' mothers, she grew up in a very religious household. And we did go to some church and, try to sort of impress that on the kids a little bit as they were coming up. I was not religious, in my children's upbringing because I'm not religious in my life. And I believed that, my strategy for religion in our household was to let my kids grow up and figure it out for themselves. Because I think that, I have opinions and that's a whole different podcast. But the one thing that I can say is that we discussed very early on, their mother and I, about the possibility of this because we saw traits and they were very stereotypical conversations. He's good with picking shoes for her and, she's good with this. And so, we bandied about the things that parents bandy about, what if he's gay? What if she's gay? How would that be? And so we had some of those conversations way before any of that, ever came really into relief. And so we were pretty easy with it. It wasn't the scary part for me, scary is the right word, was that I didn't know how to approach it. How do I deal with you? Is my interaction with you different now, or is it the same? Or
and when you say you meaning
me and
your
my
child?
children,
Okay,
yeah,
gotcha.
it is my intersection with you in a different place now. Do I have to parent you differently? And of course, what I came up with, I didn't really. I would love to say that I'm this guy that goes out and reads 50 books, but I'm not. That was their mother. I was the one that did everything every day, and I'm very reactive based. So all I knew to do was just parent the hell out of him. I was there all the time for everything. I drove every carpool. I went to every doctor's appointment. I changed almost every diaper. And so for me, it was just a matter of logistics. What's different? Nothing. We still have to go to school and we still have to go to practice and we still have to do these other things. And I still love you and, eat your vegetables. Let's get with it.
Sure. How long would you say it took you did you feel like you had to sort through this new set of circumstances?
It was something that, I hid from the enormity of what it was, like a lot of people will. It's almost overwhelming when you think about, especially if you're blindsided. We weren't blindsided, and I think that's a difference, is that we sort of saw it coming. And so when, Alex basically announced, that's my youngest, he basically announced, I'm going to decide this. Cool, let us know, when you figure it out. And that's what he did. And he sort of did the same thing. She's my oldest, and she said, I think I might be this. We said, okay, great. And I've told you that story. She came to her mother and I and said, I'm a lesbian, and we both started laughing. And she goes, I am. And we said, okay, you love all the women you like, but don't tell us that you don't like men too, because we've seen you with them and we're smarter than that. Yeah. And so that conversation turned into a much different one than she anticipated. She thought it would be a battle, and it was really just a bunch of high fives. And, okay, we know that we kind of saw this coming. Yeah. But we talked about it, and we discussed what we might have to do differently. And what this meant for us. And what we really came up with was, we don't know. And we have to do this as we go along, because there's no example for this. Yeah. My parents didn't deal with this. None of my none of the parents that I ever watched parent anybody dealt with this.
I can relate with that a lot.
And so we don't have any examples. There's no mentor on this. We're it. And as a parent, I was trying to break the chain of dysfunctionality, like we do, like so many of us are. And I had parents that loved me, but they were off doing their own thing. I've been basically on my own since I was 11, and I parented myself. And I knew that that's not what I wanted my kids to have to deal with. I wanted to be there, like physically there all the time.
And it's good to be conscious of that. And the fact that you had the wherewithal to really activate on that thought is key. So you mentioned high fives. There were no metaphorical high fives in our family when this news came out.
Right.
And I would imagine,
and I would understand that because it's scary as shit.
and I would imagine, and you're right about that. And I would imagine that for many people, if not most,
Right.
in the circles that my wife Desiree and I come from, people are a long way off from any high fives on that topic. And that is
because it feels like a failure. People think it's, oh, what's wrong? What did we do wrong? Nothing.
Yeah.
It's not a choice. You know, if you're a believer, God did this. God did this. He creates us in his own image.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something that, you know, each person, at least in a faith community, I think has to wrestle with at some point. If this is a factor in their life, if they have a loved one, and you know, I should probably pause and qualify here that even though my story and the story thread through this podcast is going to be coming from the perspective of Desiree's and my experience as parents,
As it should.
My goal for this is to make this more broadly applicable than just being parents in this situation, because I think we all can agree that unless you're just living in some microscopic bubble, odds are you have a friend, maybe a family member, maybe a sibling, someone in your orbit, whether you're in our city or somewhere else, you probably have someone in your life that this is a factor that you're aware of, and that probably it occupies some part of your mind in your interactions with this person, or it certainly shapes perhaps your perspectives.
I'd imagine it would be inescapable.
And that to me was one of the largest factors in why I wanted to start this, because I've had so many conversations with people that when you really press them on it, I don't mean in a debate standpoint, nothing confrontational, but perhaps maybe it's better put this way. The one thing that really caught me off guard as a parent in this situation is I've grown up around LGBTQ individuals.
Right.
Great people in my life. Very influential, a mentor in my childhood. But I never had to really contend with the fact that they have a salvation and they have factors in their life that some people consider, well, sin is the first word that comes to mind.
Sure.
But that is it's always a qualifying factor in the relationship. You know, love the sinner, but hate the sin.
Right.
You know, I think God has something better for them, but that's for them to contend with. But what happens when it's your child? And what happens when you go home at night, where your friends, your other people, you go home to your home, they go home to theirs,
right,
and their salvation is their responsibility. What's sin or not in their life is their responsibility. But when you're a parent and the person we're talking about is your child, there's a whole different set of considerations that come into the mix and into the equation.
Well, there's a whole other level of fear, because we have fear about ourselves and what's going to happen to us. But we also have this overwhelming responsibility that we feel about these children. Look, I'm responsible for this human. Not only, keeping them alive and making sure that they get something to eat, but that they have well-being, that they're loved, and that I want everything to be okay. And I know that I tried to control everything about my children's lives. And for my oldest, that's almost drove me insane. And it damaged our relationship. Not permanently or anything, but I think it could have been better if I had not tried to control everything that happened.
So let's talk about that. What were some of the wins, and what were some of perhaps the things that you go back and do differently when it comes to your children?
We're all, every parent has stuff they did that they don't want to, oh my gosh, I wouldn't do that again. That toy that you threw out the window on the highway or whatever it is for you. The things that I regret, which is kind of the question that you're asking, are the things that I didn't do. the things that I didn't realize, the situations and the empathy the perspective that I wasn't able to have. I didn't see things from her perspective soon enough. I didn't, as far as my son's concerned, I didn't sit down and communicate with him soon enough. It was years later that we actually talked about it. Everything was fine and we went on and we had a good relationship, but that exact thing was not discussed and how it affected the world between us. It was, I was driving him to college in California.
That's when the conversation took place?
That's when the conversation happened. And I pressed it, because I had his ass in the car. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to answer your question,
Well, I want to pause right there because your answer is I think a key point that I want the audience to really hear.
Okay.
Because your question or your answer to my question was what you didn't do.
It's what I didn't do.
And I think that that's an important distinction that we call out here, because there is, at least in our experience, and I would imagine would be the same case with many people in similar circles and similar circumstances to ours, where there's a period of being a deer in the headlights as a parent.
Absolutely.
And inaction doesn't seem like it's harmful.
It's the safest route. Doing nothing is the easiest thing. Sometimes it's the right thing. Mm-hmm. I think that I think a lot of us, I'm a Virgo and I'm going to fix that shit. And so I think a lot of times when things get handed to us, especially something like this, because I think that so many of us, when it's given to us, we receive it like a problem. This is a problem to be solved, or it's not a problem, it's just a change. And yes, there are difficulties inherent, as evidenced by all of this. We've set up this entire podcast to talk about just how difficult it is to be in this situation. So there are special things to deal with, but the things that I didn't do and the things that a lot of people don't do, as long as you're not taking away love and support, that's okay. If you don't know if you should say it, maybe hold on to it. A lot of the things that I didn't do were reactionary. Maybe I have to do this, maybe I have to solve that, maybe I need to go there, maybe we need to do... No. You still have a child. They're in they're in sixth grade or seventh grade or whatever. You're in middle school. Let's live through that. That's hard enough. We don't have to solve. There's nothing to solve.
So that's important, because you said it, this isn't a problem to solve. I do remember something you shared with me early on in our conversations, and problems and obstacles are two different things.
Right.
But you shared a quote with me, a Marcus Aurelius quote. It's one of your favorites.
It is.
Talk about that.
The obstacle is the way. I started following Stoic stuff a couple of years ago, and I read the Daily Stoic last year, which is just a different thing every day. And one that keeps coming back around is the obstacle is the way. And the idea is that when you come to a difficulty in your life, instead of turning and going the other way, very often the solution, the thing that you really want, is through the obstacle. And so what I've come to understand is that for me in this situation and in other situations in my life, when I feel resistance, I need to move toward that, because the resistance is what's showing me the work that needs to be done. The vacancy within, or whatever, the incongruence. And so when we feel this obstacle, look, if I feel an obstacle between me and my child, oh, there's this thing. I've come to understand that, no, I'm not going to work around it. I'm going right at it. I'm sitting down with my child and I'm saying, hey, I feel this weirdness. Do you feel it too? What is this? I'm lucky, and I feel like I've earned it, that I have a good relationship with my children. I'm very open, very, reciprocal, and I feel perfectly okay to sit down with them and go, I'm uncomfortable with this. Now, I wasn't always, of course. They're older now, and when your kids get older, they become a lot more easy. They're a lot easier to have a dialogue with. But there were a number of times when I had to just stop and go, I don't know, And I think that's a thing it's good to remind everyone right now that I don't know is an acceptable answer 100% of the time. And, if somebody asks you,
But
what
we
does
can
this
find
mean?
the answer together.
Correct. But I mean, if you don't know the answer right now, that's okay. If your child says, what about this? You go, I don't know. But let's figure it out. Most of the answers to most of the problems or the questions that will arise are things that will need to be done bilaterally. They will need to be done in conjunction or, in cooperation with this other human that you're dealing with. And so, I don't know. I think that sometimes we rush to fix and find answers when really the answer is just to chill the fuck out and let them be who they are. Because that's all it is.
Yeah. So let's go back to coffee and what instigated what has become this friendship.
Sure.
Built in part on this topic.
Mm-hmm.
You and I, come to find out, have a lot in common.
Yeah.
We're both Gen Xers. We both grew up at some point in our life turning a dial to tune in the radio rather than push buttons for it.
The radio was the lifeline, man.
Yeah. We found out that we both worked at the same radio station at some point too.
Yep. Clear channel. That's right.
Yeah. So I have this term that bounced around in my head early on, and it has to do with it's a broadcasting terminology term, and I know you've heard me talk about it, but it's the signal to noise ratio.
Right.
And the way I apply that is when it came to our daughter Alessandra, and this could be true, this is true of all three of our children, regardless of identity. But where this really came to be an important proactive effort on my part was to try to decipher between the signal and the noise. Now, technically what we're talking about here is, and I write about this in something we can talk about here in a minute called The Metamorphosis.
Sure.
It's my multi-week kind of email journey where I talk about some of the stories that we encountered through mine and Desiree's process with our daughter. But I talk about the signal to noise ratio in that when she came out and when I was processing through this, I didn't have the emotional vocabulary to really verbalize what I was feeling, what I was thinking, how I was processing. I really went internal. I really did. But in part, it was because I really wanted to focus on how can I decipher what's true and what's real and what's essential with my daughter,
right,
versus all of the other voices, influences, fear, shame, doubt, concern, all of those other things that, in the case of this metaphor, and I'm not calling all of them noise and useless, but in the grand scheme of what we're talking about here,
sure,
they definitely got in the way of my ability to truly love my daughter without exceptions, without fine print, and as we call it, podcast name, without asterisks.
right.
We've talked a lot about that. Talk about any thoughts that come to mind on that based on our previous conversations. Because to me, this is something that is a really easy visual metaphor to think about. I mean, like I even write, so in the Metamorphosis, I dial, I talk about the dial,
Well, I was
the
telling
radio
some guys
dial.
about this last night.
Okay.
I was with a group of friends last night and told them that I was going to come here today. And that metaphor was the easiest way to try to describe what we're talking about. The way that I described it to them, I mean, it's your metaphor, so you can describe it any way you choose. But I mean, the way it makes perfect sense to me is that the signal is the love. It's the communication and the relationship that I have with my child, with my spouse, with whoever we're dealing with. And the noise is everything else, you know. And of course, I was explaining to them that we're speaking about things in this context, you know, dealing with my LGBTQ child and what that means for me and for them in the world. And all of the other BS that comes along with it. You know, her grandmother's BS comments, and my dad's fear, and my dad's Bible, and my mom's whatever, and my sister's thing, and her parents' thing. And, you know, everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's written a book. Everybody's read an article. But really, it's all crap because it's just me and you, kid. And I'm going to try to make damn sure that it's always just you and me, kid. And all these other people and all these other opinions and all this other stuff that we're given in every way, shape, and form since the day we're born, for good and for evil, and for, you know, awesome and bad. You know, we're handed a whole bunch of stuff as we're raised, and we have to decide what we want to keep and what we want to let go of. And it's all noise. It's all noise. Some of it's beautiful noise, but if it gets in the way, you know, if it garbles this pure thing, this ribbon of truth between me and my kid, if you're twanging on that or you're trying to cut it, get out. I got two people in the world that I'm worried about, and they're my children.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And you know, if you're going to try to get in the way of that, you can take a hike. But I understand that for, you know, because I had all of those voices in my head. There's a million people talking in your ear, and it's every preacher and teacher and, you know, politician and voice that you ever heard and pundit. They're in your head. We can't stop it. But the thing that you can do is try to discern what's your heart talking, and what's everybody else trying to make your heart talk.
And that's an interesting dynamic here that we have to navigate, at least from our position,
right,
coming from a very evangelical worldview, deeply embedded within, you know, a community of various points in our life, homeschooling, you know, church, deep involvement there. Our whole lifestyle was pretty much that, you know, that evangelical type lifestyle. And when we had this news, and when I was doing what I could at the time to try to reconcile this in my heart and my mind, and between me and my daughter, and then there's between me and Desiree. I mean, everybody has to process through this at different paces with different thoughts and different outcomes. Right. I think the one thing that really caught me off guard at first, which has a lot to do with why we're sitting here together today, was that, man, in those circles, for me, I had no idea who I could talk to. I had no idea.
It's hard.
With whom this was a safe topic.
Yeah, I experienced
the last thing I needed was a Bible verse thrown at me that I've heard 1,000 times.
Right.
The last thing I needed was judgment, a prescription for how to go solve this problem.
Right. It's not a problem, kids.
And that's where I mean, there's a reality, like I said earlier, where you can throw that Bible verse at me and tell me how wrong you think my daughter is and how bad of a parent, or imply that I'm a bad parent because I'm not doing more to stop this. But the reality is that I go home, or at the time when she was still in the house, you know, Desiree and I would go home, and we had to live life at home beyond that Bible verse.
Of course.
You know, it's real easy to drop the mic,
right,
you know, and make
then
a great
go to your
point.
own house and not have to worry about it at all.
And I think that this podcast is going to be an instrument to where perhaps we can shine some light on the nuances, on the subtleties, and the number of, I mean, surprising things that I wrestled through that I didn't see coming.
Yeah.
And for me, having no one to talk to, or at least the perception that I had no one that I felt like I could safely just say what was on my mind and on my heart and ask the tough questions. That's
and be okay with saying something that maybe wasn't 100% all right, and asking a question that maybe wasn't, whatever word you want to use for it, acceptable, or,
right.
or understanding.
Or that wouldn't put me on the prayer request list, behind my back in all the other circles.
Or wouldn't make angry every gay person that you ever knew.
Yeah.
Can I ask these really inappropriate questions? Because I still have them.
Yeah. So that is where I found our conversation and our friendship so refreshing.
Right.
Because
and it's me too.
I was able
to talk about this.
I was able to sit down with you over a cup of coffee, in a cool spot, where everybody had their thing going, and
Sure.
you and I could just sit there and talk it out, and I could ask you tough questions and you could give me tough answers, and I'd go home and wrestle with it for a few weeks and then come back and we'd talk about
Right.
my next thought, or, my next challenge. And I don't want to take for granted how valuable that has been for me, and how valuable you have been in my reconciliation, or as I call it, and we'll get into this further in other episodes, but I call it a renovation.
Yeah.
I went back to the drawing board. We'll get into my profession, as a home builder,
Sure.
someone who designed homes and built homes. I mean, there's a world of metaphors about the blueprint. You touched on it earlier, how when we're born into an environment with a number of influences at play.
Yeah.
And those shape our worldview. Those influences are, what our parents think, what they believe, what their experiences were,
What their parents handed
what their
to them.
parents believed, what their parents' experiences were. And all of those, can be packaged as what they are, but they often come sort of with strings attached in a lot of ways, with expectations,
Sure.
with the reality that you may disappoint your parents if things in your family don't go the same direction that they went in the family that they created.
Right.
And
Or if they do.
So having friends that I felt like I could talk with openly about this, I found those few and far between. Now, I do want to make sure that I'm clear that that's not me throwing shade at friends.
Not at all.
Because while at first I was resentful of that fact, I was bitter that I didn't have more friends checking in on me,
Mm-hmm.
asking me, "Hey, how are you wrestling with this? How is this affecting you?"
Mm-hmm.
Because for me, that was a really unexpected thing.
I had the same thing. I mean, I was mad at the world for about a year and a half, or however long it was, because you just feel like nobody's getting it and nobody wants to hear about it, and everybody just they angle themselves at you like this is a problem for you to solve, and I'm so sorry that's happened to you.
Mm.
Well, there's not a problem. I'm going to say it again. I'll say it 50 times. It's not a problem. It's a child, and I love them. And so, yes, I felt, don't mean to interrupt you, but I felt the same thing. I was angry at the indifference of the world.
Where I came out on that, and this is fairly recently, but I've come to a new perspective on how I should view that aspect of the experience. And I liken it to this. You can't go into a Mexican restaurant
Mm-hmm.
and get upset that they're not serving pizza.
Yeah.
And what I've realized is that, at least
right.
in my circles, I mean, in the evangelical,
Mm-hmm.
conservative circles that we walked in, we didn't know of anybody who had to work through this.
Exactly.
And so our world of friends didn't have a vocabulary for this, didn't have a history or experience and anything that they could share, much less have a perspective on what it must be like from our side of this. And I was holding them to an expectation and a standard that perhaps wasn't realistic.
Nobody's going to love you like you love them.
We can unpack that later. But I've been thinking a lot about that, and while I don't really have any relationships that blew up on that particular topic, like I didn't hold anybody to why weren't you there for me?
Yeah.
In my mind, I was that way, and And so I've really been considering it from that factor. But it's such a lonely place, perceived or real. And as they say, perception is reality. Perception's not necessarily truth, but perception can be the reality that we experience.
Exactly.
And I'm thankful that you gave me a seat at the table, literally and figuratively, to be able to voice what I was feeling, what I was thinking, and for you to offer me thoughts and perspectives that help shape my way out of just a place of darkness, a place of loneliness.
For me, and thank you. I mean, that to me, that's a compliment. I'm honored to be in this chair. You know, you send things out into the universe and you don't know, you have no idea if anybody sees it or if they're reading it right, or if they're just like, oh, there goes Pete, you know, doing whatever he's doing. But then, you know, you have a conversation like this, or somebody reaches out to you and asks you questions. And I think that with age, and I've got a lot of that now, you come to understand that, yeah, I do have experience. I do have maybe something that I can bring to bear on this particular issue. Mm-hmm. And I've had this conversation with therapists and the children's mother and maybe one or two other people, but I've never had it to the depth that I've had it with you. And so the appreciation that I have is that, yeah, I'm 15 minutes ahead on this train, but I didn't get to have this conversation with anyone either, except for their mother. And my dad, who is, you know, holding his Bible probably right now. And that conversation obviously is much more difficult. So you know, yes, in response to your comment and your appreciation, I appreciate it as much or more, because the desert existed for me too, just longer. And, you know, the working my way through it was done on my own. And, you know, the answers that I found alone. And you know, the prescriptions and you know, pathways forward, I found myself and took my own way. And, you know, there aren't a lot of people. Yes, you can turn to people and tell them your situation, but, you know, they don't know any more about it than we do. And it isn't in their home.
That's the funny thing.
They can go, oh my gosh, that's so hard. But then they get to get back in their car and drive home and they don't have to think about it at all. Oh my God, that's so scary. That must be scary as shit for him. Okay, what's for dinner? And they can go off and do something else.
Yeah. I mean, I even thought about that aspect of it, which is that, you know, you use the train analogy. It's like, here I was for a period of my life, bitter and mad at my friends for not being available to me on a topic that I had a lot more experience than them on.
And that even you were uncomfortable because you don't, I'm struggling with the conversation within myself. Yeah. And it's my own damn child.
Right.
You don't have any dog in this fight. Why in the world would you be engaged?
So our conversations, back to the signal to noise topic, you were one of the signals and you helped me identify what some of the noise was. Mm-hmm. And I've had conversations with people that have asked me, like, well, you know, what have you taken off the table? Like, how did you get from where you were 7 years ago when you found out about your daughter, right, to where you are now? And what have you taken off the table from a standpoint of just the things that I deemed as noise?
Okay.
And, am I implying that all of these things that you deem as noise should be out of the equation forever? Absolutely not. Am I saying that you should walk away from church? Absolutely not. Am I saying you should walk away from friendships? Absolutely not. But what I do want to offer is the consideration of making some space for whether you're a parent with a child who's newly come out, or whether, you know, you're a friend of someone who's come out, a family member, you name it. If you've got an LGBTQ someone in your life, and your relationship matters to you,
Right.
and the kind of life experience they have matters to you. Perhaps it's worth making space for the fact that these influences we have surrounding us, it might be worthwhile to temporarily tune those out.
I think we have to always remember, me included. There are two things I want to say. The first thing is there's a word called sonder, and it's an idea. And it's the concept that every person that you see and every individual that you engage with and interact with is having a fully relational and immersive experience just like you are.
Mm.
And so if we can remember that all these humans that we're dealing with are having the same ongoing deep experience that we are, then it gives us a touch more empathy. And I've now, of course, forgotten the other thing that I wanted to say, because that's how my brain works. But ask me your question again. I'm sorry, it's probably not very good podcasting, but ask me your question
It's
again.
fine, man. This is a conversation.
Yeah.
It's so one other thing I want to touch on, though, is that
I remember it now.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
All right.
The thing that, the signal to noise ratio, the thing that I defined, and I didn't do it on purpose, but I did think this way when I was organizing my own life with my children and how I was going to engage and think about them. And I did this on my own, sort of, huddled in my own little teepee. I'm going to deal with you. I love you. I'm talking to Jeff now. My phone's in the other room. I'm sure I'm getting messages. Instagram is happening. The world is going on. It's always going on. But I'm talking to Jeff.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to remember and realize and dedicate myself on purpose. Because we all get 100 messages. They're all coming at 100 miles an hour and they're all coming all the time. And it's like, no. I am dedicated to these two little humans and it's my job. It was my job to raise them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be damned if I'm not going to do a good job at this. And so I dedicated myself to them. All this other bullshit is just that. And I'll say it again, their grandmother's opinion, my dad's Bible, my mom's whimsy, whatever it is. I'm here with them.
Mm.
And so I didn't use that metaphor on purpose, but it really is exactly what I did. I focused on my children and what do they need and what am I doing and how is this working? Am I communicating effectively with you, Delaney? Am I hearing your message, Alex? What do you need? And I will admit, and we've talked about this, there was a great deal of time in which I did not hear what she needed. And we fucked that up so royally. And it's one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life. That we just didn't hear her. We didn't hear her. And she had no port in the storm for a year. And then we did. And the transformation of her between being assailed 100% of the time and actually having safety at home, it was physical. You could see it. And that happened even before she came out. And so I think that experience, she was bullied horribly. She got bullied out of her middle school and we had to send her to a different school. She was on, let's just say we had to make some changes at the house because it was dangerous. And when that kind of experience happens to you and the therapist looks you in the eye and says that she's afraid that your daughter will complete because she's smart enough to, and you realize that this is real. And it's my child she's talking about. My child hates her life so much that she wants to make it go away. When that happens first, oh, you're gay? I don't fucking care. I don't fucking care. Yeah, I'm here to keep you alive and happy. And I've already been working on that. So the rest of this, I don't give a shit about. I'm here to keep you alive and happy. And everything else is noise. And yes, it's all handy at some point. Avogadro's number's great in a certain spot, but I don't need it on Christmas morning. Thanksgiving's challenging with your family, but the ride in and the ride out is where I get to talk. And we're going to set this up so that we get and think and know what we need to think, know, and believe going in and coming out. So when grandma and grandpa say the thing that they're going to say, and we know they're going to say it, we all get prepped for it. And we all go in and we all have a knowing look, and it becomes actually a bonding intimacy to defend our little squad against the slings and arrows, the noise of the outside. Man, you want to talk about signal.
Yeah.
If I can sit there and look across the room as grandma's giving some random shit to the group, and we look at each other with the knowing, she's still full of crap. Man, I got it.
I like the way you turn that around. Part of this podcast is to tell our story. And
Sure.
there's a lot to our story that a lot of people don't know.
Right.
But what you just said about your experience with her landed because we've been there too.
Sure.
And you know my story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a side of it that I don't know that either one of us could ever really convey to an outsider who...
You can't do it. It's, imagine the most afraid you've ever been. And throw on top of it the most ashamed you've ever been. And throw on top of it the biggest responsibility you've ever had. And throw it all together. And then have somebody come and tell you, by the way, you're doing it wrong. And you're doing it so wrong that this project that you're working on is going to immolate itself. It's going to implode. Oh my God.
And in the communities we come from, for some people, there's even an eternity in hell afterwards.
Yeah. For both of us.
Mm-hmm.
For her too.
Yeah.
And, and it's the shame that's heaped on top of that. It's, really, when you get through it, it just becomes unconscionable. Now we're handed it, it's handed to us, and, we come by it honestly, but there's a great deal of fear. This is all rooted in fear. Everything we're talking about is rooted in fear. It's all of being afraid. We're afraid of things we don't understand. And so many people don't understand gayness, the queerness of the world. I don't understand it. I don't understand transness. I don't get it. It does not compute. Doesn't matter. My daughter is. So what? Okay. She's still my daughter. We go to dinner. We eat at, we have pizza. It hasn't changed. So no, you don't have to get it. I don't like broccoli. Millions of people are loving on broccoli.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool.
Yeah.
My favorite color is green. Yours is red. Who's wrong? Nobody. I don't know. It frustrates me, and the fear of losing your child is something. I mean, look, how many people are out there strapping helmets on their kid and putting hand sanitizer on? Imagine if you think they're going to be eternally damned. That's scary as shit.
Mm-hmm.
And it's noise. It's noise.
And we're going to cover that in future episodes.
I think it's noise. Everyone gets their own opinion on that.
So our conversations, one of the things that has done for me, one of the many things it's done for me is given me some repetitions in these topics, some vocabulary, some ways to articulate some of the nuances that aren't readily obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And in doing so, that's sort of given me a sense, comfort, perhaps not the right word, but maybe fortitude to tactfully allow this topic to sort of permeate its way to the top of my conversational repertoire, if you
With
will.
other people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And an interesting thing that I encountered along the way to what became this podcast,
Mhm.
is as I noticed when I opened up, even in the most casual ways, to mention my daughter and her girlfriend,
Mhm.
for instance.
Yeah, that's a good way, a good little thing to drop.
What I noticed happening, and I wouldn't say that we're within and among the same circles that we had been in prior for 2 decades,
Sure.
but it doesn't mean that we don't cross paths with them. It doesn't mean that I don't care about them. It doesn't mean I don't love them. But what I have encountered is a very interesting thing, which is that more than once when I've had the casual mentioning or the conversation, or I've just made it known
Mhm.
about our daughter, I've had instances where people have come back to me a little quieter,
Mhm.
on the down low, maybe by text.
Yeah.
Hey, can we come back to something you said? I mean, when you said your daughter had a girlfriend, did you mean this? And of course, the answer is yes. That's what
Yeah.
it meant.
Yeah, that's why I said that way.
Well, it's interesting because our child has been using similar language, and I don't have a vocabulary for what our child is saying.
Right.
Can we go to coffee and talk about this? I mean, that's a scenario that's happening more and more in my
What a
my
gift.
life.
What a gift.
And as the guy who didn't feel like he had anybody to go talk to, suddenly I feel like the guy who has to be that guy.
You're 15 minutes ahead on their train.
Yeah. And so what I've noticed is that the stories that I tell, the language that I use, the terminology that sort of seems to be fitting with my life experience and the way I can explain things, I felt like this just churning desire within me to do something with it.
Yeah.
And I'll take you back to one of the very first things I did when, shortly after we had learned about Alessandra coming out to us, I sat lonely in my office one afternoon and I searched for podcasts of Christian parents of LGBTQ kids.
Right. How'd that work?
Nothing came up except for a few episodes of other podcasts where maybe they touched on the topic, but it wasn't a podcast. And I want this to fill the void that was a void when I needed it filled.
Sure.
When I look at, we talked about our past in broadcasting.
Yeah.
I mean, my undergrad, I can put my degree to use for a change in something like this, right?
Right.
I have the life experience, just the opportunity, the time and resources to do it, and this burning desire to tell our story, to shed some light on things that aren't so obvious and easily understood and identified by people in the outside world who aren't experiencing this.
Right.
Who may not feel like it's relevant to them, but I would argue in many cases it is.
Which, I mean, I'll turn this on you a little bit.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel when somebody reaches out to you and says, "Hey, you mentioned something at a party, like you said, oh, you talked about your daughter's partner, your girlfriend." How does that make you feel? I mean, what's your first initial reaction to that?
I may have something to offer you. I may have some experience that may help make more sense of this for you earlier so that you can activate earlier and love your child in the purest form earlier than we were able to. Because
it's like an honor. It's an excitement. Oh my gosh,
It
I get
is.
to try to help.
It is. And I know you've been reading through some of my metamorphosis messages that
I've made it through almost all of them.
one of the things that I cover in that is the importance of investing early and the consequences of not.
Right.
And those who wish to subscribe can, and it's free. It's a multi-week kind of thing that walks you through a lot of these topics that aren't so obvious.
He's quite good at it, so it's worth it.
Thank you. It's a story to tell, and it's got a great inspiration point. I love my daughter dearly, but was it as about her as you thought it would be?
Oh, no. No, I mean, this whole thing is about the world at large. Um, we happen to be approaching this because it came into our home.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be, I feel more than comfortable saying we might not, we wouldn't be having this conversation if it hadn't come into our house.
Mm.
It lives in our table.
Yeah.
And that's what it takes.
So
These people that are asking you, they wouldn't be having that coffee if it hadn't shown up at their house.
what you're talking about is what Dr. David Gushee, who's a person and a voice that you're going to hear me cite often in the future.
Okay.
He was instrumental in helping me come to terms and understandings with some of this.
Mm-hmm.
But what he calls what you're describing is a transformative encounter. He makes the case that no matter what your worldview is, no matter what your upbringing is,
Right.
and this is a guy with deep theological expertise and evangelical ties,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll get to his story at some point. But he makes the point that until you've had that transformative encounter, it's nearly impossible to know exactly what the other side looks like.
Sure.
And you and I have been on the other side of that. And he is so right.
Oh, without question. I think it goes, for all kinds of things. Anything that a human might experience, we all want to think, oh, sure, I can empathize with that. If you've never been divorced, you don't know what it's like. If you don't have a child, you don't know what it's like. I used to watch Law and Order incessantly. It was a big part of our marriage. And there was one episode in which Jimmy Smits threw out this little bon mot that has stuck with me my whole life. There are two types of people in this world. There are the people that have children, and there are the people that don't. And neither is ever going to understand the other. And that is what we're talking about. You either have I'm just using the word queer because LGBTQ is a tongue twister. So,
Yes. As is Love Without Asterisks.
Yeah, asterisks.
I didn't do myself any favors.
I was going to say, well, my name is Peter Fulmer, and I used to have to sit on the radio. So I just, the othering that we do for anything that we don't understand, and it could be race or religion or sexual orientation or any of the others that we have in this world, and, they generate fear in us. And so, yes, we are approaching this because we had to. And normally that's the only way anybody ever does anything,
mm-hmm.
including me and everybody else in the world. No, I don't want to change my flat tire unless it goes flat.
As you said before, the obstacle is the way.
The obstacle is the way. And so, yes, we had to become better. We had to become more inclusive. We had to address these inconsistencies that we had been handed by our ancestors in our society. And I think in time, all of us will have to, hopefully, at some point, confront the BS that we've been handed. A lot of us can go blithely through our lives and never have to. Good for you. God, that must be awesome. But the rest of us, we have things that we have to confront. And, most of us won't do it willingly unless it just comes and sits down at your dinner table. And so, yeah, it could be the guy that works with you. It could be the man your sister married, or the woman your sister married, or, the roommate that your cousin took on, the tenant in your duplex downstairs, whatever. But there are going to be people in your life that don't live the same life that you, and you're going to have to deal with it. And, we're having to deal with it because they literally walked into our living room one day and said, hey, I'm not what you thought.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that I express this, especially early on in this podcast, that, again, you and I are sitting here talking about our experience as parents.
Sure.
But many of the things that we wrestled through, many of the revelations that we arrived at don't necessarily just apply to parents of LGBTQ individuals, right?
Right. Well, we love our kids so much. We got really into this. That's why we made such the switch, and we did work.
So part of my goal for this, though, is back to something I said earlier about my challenge with where I was about the friendships.
Sure.
And the perceived silence on the topic, and how I felt very very lonely in that.
Yeah.
I want this podcast to serve as a broad enough example of walking alongside someone who is LGBTQ. I want it to be the kind of podcast where those friends, and I'm not thinking of anybody in particular,
Sure.
but where those friends who perhaps just didn't have the vocabulary or the understanding or the confidence to bring it up, I would love for this podcast to shed some light on some of these topics so that those who are listening do know how to step up and do know how to respond and how not to respond.
Well, and to know that it's okay to ask questions. It's
Yeah.
okay to not know.
Sometimes the tough question is the most welcome thing.
Well, right.
Any question at all.
I would imagine that what you just said is one of the most true things that we're going to say today. Any question at all, showing interest and an open-minded curiosity rather than a judgmental, lowdown on it,
Yeah.
whatever you want to put down. I think anytime anyone turns to you, especially on something that we felt we were all uptight, we don't know, we're struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but somebody else turns to you and they're very obviously in a similar place. Anybody that can give you just a seat next to them. Oh, you know this too? Tell me all about it.
Yeah.
It's a different world. It's a whole different universe. And anybody that's been there before, I want to hear about it.
Sure. Well, and some people,
it's not just your kid, it's the, like you said, it's anybody.
Yeah. And some in our audience may be like, well, why didn't you just bring it up yourself? Why didn't you instigate the conversation? And
because I like having friends and I like being in society,
It's a fair question. But again, capital city, reddest state of America, it's a statistical probability that a good portion of your friends have views that in some way oppose or view this situation in a negative light. And so it's not a very inviting environment for that topic to be brought up. Secondarily, let's say we've had instances of this in our life and in our friend circles where I know this has happened with Desiree where everybody's talking about their kids or what their kids are going through, but the moment Desiree brings up our daughter, suddenly the conversation either goes theological or political. And Desiree could be talking about something just totally innocuous and random about something our daughter did that has nothing to do with this topic.
Really?
But suddenly the door's open, to maybe it's because it reminds someone of their views and their stance, but
they want something to blame.
And those are, some of the lessons that we've learned about that led us to not bring this up for the most part. But it's a very quiet, lonely place to have to live as a parent when you've surrounded yourself and done life with people who are wonderful people, who love the way they know how to love, who believe what they believe because they've been taught it, they've been handed it, it makes sense to them, it's rational to them, and experience hasn't led them to something else. In our case, it led us to something else. And it meant we had to kind of start looking for a different kind of menu. The Mexican food restaurant is not going to serve pizza.
Right.
And so it's easy to say, well, the cliques, they've kind of walked away from everybody. They've left. Who knows what's being said, if anything at all.
Right.
But from our side, that's in large part.
Well, your brain fills in,
Yeah. So that's an aspect of this, one of many that I hope to cover in future episodes of this. I brought up metamorphosis a few times,
right?
And we keep chasing other rabbits, and I love it. I want to talk about metamorphosis as what I intend it to be, and I know you've been reading through some of it,
right? Because
I've had a few test readers, and so I want to explain what this is. It's a multi-week email journey, as I call it. It's where you're going to receive, if you're a subscriber, and again, this is all free. This podcast makes nothing. This is all just
Right.
altruistic. It's all for what comes
We
with
are
it.
not being paid.
This series of emails has probably grown to rival my passion for what you and I are doing right now. As I've written through this, it's caused me to really go back and isolate memories and ponder them, and to try to rechannel what I might have been feeling. You know, back then, I feel like I was an entirely different person, and I'm talking a period of in the last 7 years. I mentioned earlier I lacked an emotional vocabulary. I had a bad habit of letting Desiree handle the emotional aspects of our family because
as men do.
Because, you know, as a female, in my mind, she's somehow equipped,
Right.
just right out of the box for this. And
It's already been part of her world. I'm doing something else.
I'm the business guy. As long as, you know, I got things I take care of, and that's not one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And
But you can't silo it over there.
you can't. And this is one where the road ran out and I hadn't slowed down, and I felt like I ran right through that roadblock into an emotional environment that I had no idea how to navigate it.
Mm-hmm.
So doing the work necessary to learn better ways of empathy, better ways of processing through emotions, identifying them.
Right.
And in combination with going back through these memories, in my writing over the past several months, what I've noticed is I've been able to re-experience them in ways that I didn't the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And we hear terms like closure and, you know, all those kind of terms that some people tend to shy away from or think, oh, that's just, you know, mental health speak. But it has been absolutely therapeutic for not only myself to go through and write these and reread them and relive them, but as I've read them to Desiree, the one thing I've heard time and time again is that she's told me, I never knew you saw it that way, or I never knew you felt that way,
Mm-hmm.
or, oh my gosh, I didn't realize those dynamics were present in that experience, the way that you've articulated them. And I'm so thankful for that, because as recently as last night, you know, Desiree shared with me how much she's been able to appreciate in new ways the value of our experience. It's really easy to go back and look at all the negative things and the things that
wring your hands and feel bad about it.
And to even some extent, it can be very tempting to play the victim card.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's not who we are. And so all that to say, I'm very excited about what Metamorphosis has to offer, and it's a simple thing. You can go to the website, lovewoa.com, look for the Metamorphosis block, and it's a simple subscribe. It's going to take you through multiple weeks. You're going to receive a few emails, 2 to 3 emails a week for several weeks, that progressively tells a story and touches on topics that I believe are central to what we've gone through, and that highlights and that points out some of the things, again, that I've mentioned many times aren't so obvious, that are very nuanced, but that doesn't mean that they're not important and they're not essential to think about. And this isn't just for parents. This is for anyone in what I kind of consider a supporting role, whether it's the aunt of Alessandra, or the teacher of Alessandra, or maybe it's the brother-in-law, you know, or kind of that uncle who's always got something to say at Thanksgiving that you mentioned.
Right. We all got one.
But at the same time, maybe you're listening to this or watching this and you don't have a child who's LGBTQ, but you know someone who is, whether it's someone else's child, or you know, your sister, or just someone in your life.
Sure.
And maybe you, like me, don't have the vocabulary and the experience to be fully present to someone who's important to you on that journey.
Sure.
And so for me, while you and I and anyone who's a guest on this podcast, we're going to talk about, what's relevant between us. This is my way of kind of having the microphone to myself, but it's in writing.
Right.
Or every issue that comes out, you can click the button on top that says, have me read this to you. If you're a podcast listener, you don't have to read it. I'll read it to you.
You can call and I'll read it to you.
That great radio voice of yours. But I really would encourage, if you want to take this at a different pace than an episode or two a month of this podcast, you want to dive in, roll up your sleeves, and really learn about what I'm talking about, I encourage the audience to subscribe to that. It's something that I'm really proud of. The feedback I'm getting has been really solid, and I'm happy about it. I'm curious if there's anything that's kind of jumped out at you as I know we've talked about many of the stories that I tell, but
well, the things that one of the things that I like about it, and that I know that you're trying to do. I don't know if you're doing it on purpose, but it seems that it's happening throughout. And the purpose of this podcast and this conversation, the ones that follow it, blind spots. I'm big on blind spots. I want to know what mine are, because I know we all have a million of them. And just a different perspective. I think that's what we're doing here, is trying to use a voice that's familiar to share a perspective that's not. And, we're speaking to people that don't have this experience in their lives, and we have it. And guess what? We have all the other experiences that you have had in your life. We're kind of the same, except for that we have this one other. And we're going to, help you try to navigate what that's like and what that means. And I really enjoy the metamorphosis emails. Like I said, I haven't made it through all of them. There's 2 left, but I do appreciate, and I try to read them from the perspective of someone that isn't me, that to whom we're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they are gentle entrees into the world that we're talking about. And I think that's wise and necessary. This is, it's sticky stuff. And a gentle and soft way in to the information that's hard to process. Because this is, if it's new to you, man, everything in your world has been telling you to reject it. And so it's very hard to open up and let it in. And I think that these emails are a fine way to start that process, or at least engage with the idea of it.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the best we'll ever get,
I want the podcast and Metamorphosis to be the roadmap that we didn't have.
Exactly. The thing, I'm on Instagram, and we all see the same things. You want to be the person your child needed, be the person that you needed when you were a little kid. Yeah. I want to be the person that I needed when I was 30.
Yeah.
Or 35, or 40, whatever it was, 15 to 20 years ago. Man, I hope that you're that. I hope that that's what this is. I hope that this can open the door to a whole bunch of people that didn't have the language, didn't have the questions, or even the comfort to ask the question. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to be ashamed and wonder what the hell's going on.
And the best way to get past that is curiosity.
Yeah. Speak up. It's okay. You're going to find out really fast who your friends are and who aren't.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. I can't blame anybody that doesn't get it, because they don't get it honestly.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the many stories I want to tell on this podcast. The podcast is the story, and it's really tempting to try to just dive right into everything.
Well, this could be 5 hours,
It could be. And I have a feeling.
How long it's been? Okay.
I have a feeling that you're going to be in this chair many times over the course of the life of this podcast.
I want to be the Stanford Steve of this podcast.
And you're more than welcome to do that. I want to thank you for taking the time, not only today to sit in this chair, but the days that you sit across from me over coffee.
Well, I'm grateful to you, Jeff. I am I am flabbergasted with the passion and the ability that you've shown in creating all of this. It feels like it was 2 weeks ago when you said, I'm thinking about starting a podcast, and now here we are doing it. It's remarkable. I honor your mission and your passion, and I am truly honored to be asked to share whatever experience I might have. The biggest and best thing I've ever done and will ever do is the parenting of my children. And it's the thing I'm the most proud of, the way I actually approached this when it happened to me, without a voice or a hand up from anyone, including my own spouse. We were both in our own worlds and navigating life independently at that point. So I am incredibly proud of myself and of my children, because they're fucking awesome, and of you and of this. This is great. And I hope that it does at least catch the ear of a few folks that are brave enough to ask the questions.
And I think that's a great one to end it on.
Very good.
Thank you again for being here.
Thanks, Jeff.
Look forward to the next time.
Yeah, me too.
What a conversation to start this journey. Peter reminded us that loving our kids well sometimes means standing in tension with the expectations of our faith community and culture. That silence from our circles can feel crushing, which is why finding voices of experience matters so much. We discussed how transformative encounters, big or small, can change us, and why presence, not perfection, is often what our kids need most. We touched on the weight of community judgment, the ache of friendships that can't stretch with you, and the resilience it takes to show up anyway. For all of that, I'm grateful to Peter for being willing to be my very first guest here on Love Without Asterisks. I have a feeling this won't be the last time you hear from him on the podcast. If this conversation spoke to you, do me a favor, hit subscribe. That way you won't miss out on what's ahead. I'd also appreciate it if you'd share it. Send it to a friend, a sibling, a parent, or anyone you know who has an LGBTQ+ someone in their life. You never know who might need it right now. And if you're ready to take the next step, let me personally invite you to join Metamorphosis. It's a free 8-week guided email journey I've written to walk alongside you. Together, we'll explore what it means to love without exception or condition. Through stories, metaphors, and reflections that draw from my experience as a parent, but are written in a way that speaks to anyone with an LGBTQ+ someone in their life. Along the way, we tackle not only hope and connection, but some of the tougher topics, like reconciling faith and identity, silence in our churches, and mental health. It's raw, it's honest, and it's designed to help keep you moving forward toward love. You can subscribe for free at lovewoa.com/metamorphosis. Thanks for joining me for this foundational episode of Love Without Asterisks. I'm your host, Jeff Click, reminding you that the greatest of these is love.